How do you prepare a tree for a bonsai show? One of the challenges I have put for myself this year is to get a tree in one of the bigger shows. Now I have been successful. This tree has been accepted for the National Bonsai Show, which takes place in about 4 weeks. I have got 2 more trees that I've submitted for a show, one for a show in Berlin and one for a show locally to the state here. These 3 trees need to be prepared for the show, and that is what this video is about. By the time this video comes out, all 3 shows will be over, and I'll show you which trees were in the show and which weren't. This tree is a yew. I have pruned it last year, but not so strong because I didn't think it was going to be in a show this year. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to prune it, I'm going to clean it up. You see there's little branches hanging down from the bottom. I'm going to take those off. Then I'm going to look at the base of the tree because you can see the moss has grown over it. After working on the roots, I need to moss the pot. There is nice moss on here, so I'm going to conserve and reuse. And then I'm going to clean the pot, I'm going to oil the pot, I'm going to look for a table, and I'm going to look for an accent plant. This tree also was submitted. I am not sure it is going to get in. Well, it is a Potentilla. It is in a very odd pot. Not everybody likes this pot. I do. And I have been pruning away all the little cut ends that were left over, the little stumps. And as it is emerging from winter, I'm going to go through, cut out everything that isn't sprouting. So there's a couple of buds that are not alive, but I'm quite happy overall. This tree seems to be in very good health. I've not received confirmation that this has been accepted. We'll see. This lilac has been accepted in a show in Berlin in, I think it's 5 weeks time. And I'm really happy that it has been accepted, but I'm really sad. Spring has come very quickly this year. It is now 20 degrees. It is really warm and it doesn't look like it's going to cool down anytime soon. So this is living right now in the garage. The garage is the coolest place I have. I hope that these flower buds that you can see here everywhere are not going to open all that much before the show. I would really like to have a few locations with flowers during the show. Well, here also I need to clean off the old moss. I'm going to gently repot it, also in the hope that that slows down the tree a little bit. Then, a few days before the show, I'm going to prune off all the new shoots. I'm going to just leave 2 or 3 leaves on every single branch, assuming, of course, that the flowers are still there. Now, with only a few weeks to go to a show, it is important to not do too much work. There are already buds that are starting to open up. So in 2, 3, 4 weeks, this will be completely green with young sprouts. And that is really, really nice. But if I now prune these branches, I won't get these sprouts. So I'm only going to remove really offending branches. Like this one sticks up a little bit and there's a nice bud below, and I can prune this back all the way to the inside and nobody needs to know that this was pruned. Here on the inside are quite a few, and there's a little bud here. So I can reduce this one to there. So this really is about minimal corrections. Here at the bottom there's some needles hanging down and a little branchlet coming down. Now I wasn't going to join the show, so I wasn't going to submit this tree. Therefore, this deadwood has not been completely finalized. I should of course have done this way sooner. But you know what, I'm just going to take my little tool and I'm going to see whether I can create a little bit of a more natural shape to this. Of course I can't do too much work because then it will be very obvious that this is new. All pruned, cleaned up. I might have to do a little bit more pruning later on, but for now this is good enough. And then a couple of days before I drive off to the show, I'm going to go through the whole tree, remove all the ugly needles, and might pinch a few of the growing tips if this grows too quickly. I'm keeping it in the shade because here also the buds are about to open. If I can stall that for another 2 weeks, then in 3 weeks during the show there will be a nice green fresh coat around the tree. I will need to reuse the moss that I have, but I'm not sure. I think I want to put it on a little bit later. It is quite dry, but for now I'm just going to put this aside in larger chunks on some wet substrate, and this I can now put somewhere protected from birds so that later on I actually have moss to put on my pots. 3 weeks have passed since the last recording, and unfortunately, or fortunately, it's been very dry and unseasonably warm. So I haven't done anything to the root ball, but we're now 1 week out from the exhibition and I really need to start putting moss on this. Now I told you before I didn't have any moss, so what did I do over the last 3 weeks? Exactly, I have been out collecting moss in different types, in different colors, and I'm now going to put that here on the surface. Now it is nice to have this sphagnum on here, that would keep it nice and moist, but the sphagnum is not going to stay because it's way too high. And another little thing that has happened is that there's a little bit of scale that has formed on the root base, so I'm going to have to clean that out, and for that I'm using a little bit of vinegar. Let's clean this up, put some moss on here, and then I'm also going to bring out my lilac, because the lilac has been developing quite fast. That is another 3 weeks before it goes into an exhibition, and I'm still trying to keep the buds back. So it is standing in my shed during the day, so it stays cold. Overnight it's outside with the shed doors open. And I just hope that for the next 2 or 3 weeks I can stop it from flowering. And I'll moss that up as well. Always important in the early morning, have a nice cup of joe with your work. And yes, you mentioned it, it was mentioned in another video. Do I let my tea get cold or my coffee get cold? Unfortunately it happens, and no, I don't drop substrate in there. Not all the time. A little bit of vinegar. This is a little bit tricky because I don't want to have big traces on here. I don't want the root ball to look like it has been extensively cleaned for the exhibition, because these are roots that are going to be visible. So I'm just going to put a little bit on there. Then I'm going to wash it down. And then I'm going to just let it dry and see what it looks like. And of course, once the moss is added, I don't want to get any dirt or any grime back on the tree. So this is also the moment to gently clean out that wood. And I'm also using a little bit of vinegar for it. And then I'll wash the whole tree down, in the hope that this really cleans out the dead wood enough to make it look natural in a week's time. This is also the last time that I can really clean the pot. Once the moss is on there, no chance that I can still really clean it. And now the tricky thing is to get this whole thing covered in moss while showing off the roots, because in the end the moss is just complementing the roots, but the roots should still be visible, and I don't want any open spaces in there. So this is going to be tricky, and I want it to be in different colors. Now one of the problems here that this root ball is a lot higher than the rim of the pot, so I have to make the moss very thin here at the front. There's no nice roots here in the front, so that's going to be a deduction from the jury on how well they think this tree has been made. This is very nicely developed, but here there's only one root. So there's a couple of weak points in the root ball, but you know what, that's part of the game. And now I just have to start somewhere with adding pieces of moss to it. Clean them out as I go. And why not just start at the front? But you see that this moss is fairly tall, and I can compress it a little bit, or I can use a knife
and then just cut off the bottom. But yeah, and it has another week, which is enough to get it veer back, but not to really grow. So it needs to be complete after this covering. Getting a large area covered is not so hard. It is mostly difficult to get these small areas covered. So I'm using tweezers and I'm just trying to get something in between here. So I can really get this in between the roots. So it's really as if it is coming from between the roots, taking care that the root itself remains visible on all sides. And now it's really about carefully taking little bits and pieces and blending them together, right? So this is one with lots and lots of nice flower stalks. Trying to squeeze that in here. There's a little bit of dirt, take that out. And then gently squeezing this into position, trying to connect it to the rest. And now, of course, keeping it nice and humid so the moss has time to recover. I would say this looks pretty good. And now the last bit that I wanted to do is try to see whether I can get a few of these flakes off. I still do want to keep some flakes because it does show age, but I'm hoping for a few flakes that I get more of this nice red color. And it seems to be in a perfect state for the exhibition. The buds are just about to open. With a bit of luck, next weekend all the buds are just open a few millimeters and you get this nice bright green shine to it. Now I've been mentioning it already. I'm going to put oil on the pot. What this does, all these uneven looking spots will look a lot smoother. And also the color gets a little bit more vibrant, a deeper color. And what I'm using is just a commercial walnut oil. There's camellia oil. There's all sorts of vegetable oils that you can use. I just have to try and get this cap off. Good to realize that this cap doesn't come off all that easily. So I need to look that I bring a spatula with me when I go to the show. So I can also put a bit of oil just before the show. I'm not sure whether this is a wrong oil to use. As for me, this is also new territory. As you may have seen in my video on challenges for the year, this is my challenge, getting trees into shows. Now already I'm noticing that paper is a very bad idea because it falls apart and it leaves traces on the pot. So live and learn. But I'm just going to continue. The pot will need to get it clean afterwards anyway. But I'll do that the day before the show. I'll do the final cleanup and the final touch-up. And then when the tree is all prepared, we get to things like a display table. This is a nice little low wooden display table. And I like that it is low because this tree is of course a fairly formal tree. It fits well to this table. And why does it fit well? Well, because this area where you see the little line, that needs to contain the pot. The rim is allowed to stick over it a little bit, but by putting it on this table, I get a nice solid foundation for a tree that is supposed to be a somewhat formal tree. Then, now of course the tree is looking backwards towards the camera. This is a back branch, so I need to flip it around so I can also show you the rest of the display. Be careful, always lift and move and don't scratch the table because after that you get scratches. And with a formal upright it is somewhat difficult to decide what is the direction of the tree. In this case I have made two small gins here, but a very strong side branch on this side. The strongest roots are on this side and I've planted the tree on the right side of the pot. All of it is indicative that the tree moves in that direction. That means that if I want to put an accent plant here in the display, I need to put the accent plant on this side of the tree. Now I don't have any good accent plants at the moment. They're all dormant, they're ugly. I use tenpai. Tenpai are tiny little figurines. I've got this one. I've got this little monk, and just for fun of it, I have these little kittens. Now this is not such a high quality tenpai, it is just a plastic thing, but these are bronze and they are very, very detailed. Now if you look at this little bird, typically you'd have the foot parallel to the pot. That means if I do that like this, then the branch moves in that direction. So that is already good, so it looks at the tree. The bird also looks at the tree. The problem is that if I look at it from this side, I don't really see the eye of the bird. If I flip the tenpai around, then it does make a lot more sense, because the bird looks at you, it looks at the tree. So I'm not sure whether I want to put it like this. This one, monk, is very stable. This doesn't have a clear direction. It's almost formal upright. So to me, that is why it would fit to this tree that's also formal upright. So I'm thinking about using this little monk. And then finally, to add to this whole complexity of displaying a tree, these are not supposed to sit directly on the table. No, we need to put something below it. So I've got these tiny little pieces of wood. This is just a very simple cut of a branch that I can use for this. This is more elaborate. This is a very old branch that was cut in a thin layer and nicely coated. And this is a very elaborate. This one, color-wise, matches really well. But it is quite big for the display, I find. If I do this and then I put... Not really, right? Actually, it should point towards like this. No, I think it's too present. So let's put this one away. If I take the other one, the very small one, and I put it on, it's a little small, right? It barely reaches beyond the sitting figurine. So my options are minimal. I can use this one. Then I have to find what's a nice front. I like it like this, a little bit this way, and then put it on here. And with that, I've got the whole display for this tree together. Now I need to wrap this up and make sure it stays moist and keep the birds out of it. I'm only going to water with rainwater from now on, because otherwise I get new calcium deposits. This I need to wrap up. And the next that you see of this tree is going to be in the show when I take it for pictures or putting it together in the show itself. It looks like the repotting has helped a little bit in slowing it down. The pot is still very cold because I keep it in the garage and it's going to go back in very quickly. I'm not going to keep it out all that much. Remossing, I'm going to wait for another week. I just used so much moss for my other tree that I'm now going to have to look for some new moss, and I'm going to first let that recover in a thin layer of water. And then next week I'm going to fill this whole substrate up. This you can see is still nice and alive, so I can nicely align the moss. Also here on the side, this hollow I've not cleaned out. I'm going to put some moss here as well to really emphasize that this is an old decaying trunk. And maybe I'll put a little bit of moss here on this section as well. This is a table that was at my school and I brought it home with me, and I've never really used it since. But this might be a nice opportunity to use this table. But as I said, it is a little bit large.
In der Mitte? In der Mitte.
So. Ja. Aber Valentin, du hattest den auch unter noch, ne? Ja.
Das mit der Krone, das ist noch ein bisschen dunkel da oben.
And there we have it. In the show, between quite some impressive trees. Of course, it doesn't hold with all the trees in the exhibition, but still I'm pretty happy to get out. Could grow out the top, or it could grow out this top and make it more balanced, but those are future steps. This tree, therefore, is not completely ready to be in the show, but still, I want to put something in. That's how it goes. 10 more days and this tree will be in the show. It has been inside in the dark and in the cold for quite a lot of time. And you can see these branches have now stretched considerably, which is not very pretty, but also the flowers have stretched considerably. But nice with this species is that there's little flower buds also here in the elbows. So what I'm going to do is quite drastic. I'm going to remove most of these flower buds here. This will of course stimulate the rest of the flower buds to start growing. And at the same time I'm going to look and I'm going to remove these extended growth from all over the tree. The tree gets to stay outside until it is time to go to the show Today it's Wednesday. I'm driving on Friday in a week's time. So that's 10 days from now. Then hopefully by the time that I arrive, I have flowers that are opening up. Now it's a bit of a tricky thing on how much to trim. So I should be a little bit conservative and then I can always trim off more if I need to. So the exhibition with the big yew was last week. Now I can prepare this because next week the exhibition will take place in Berlin where I'm going to exhibit this tree. You can see that keeping it cool has really helped to keep the flower buds small. It's another week until the exhibition, so right now it is ready to start getting a little bit more heat, a little bit more sun, and hopefully these buds will then develop over the course of the next week. On top of that, final tweaks, getting rid of everything that's brown inside the tree. Later this week, before I put it in the exhibition, I need to remove these 2-3 wires that are still on the tree. And today I'm going to moss the whole thing up. Now I didn't have a lot of moss, so I found a solution. I'm just going to take the moss from my yew. I think that looks pretty good. It's always nice to see how a tree improves when you add a little bit of moss. And I've also put a little bit of moss here in a part of the dead trunk and here and here. Let's see whether I get any comments during the show. And there we have it. Tree in the exhibition. And as scheduled, hoped and expected, the flowers are opening up during the show. I know, it's gorgeous and it is a shame, but I am going to take the flowers off. That way this tree will grow a lot better. Next year it will save a little bit of energy, it will start sprouting again. Also the moss that's on here, I'm going to just put it back into a big container because maybe my third tree for the third show will also be accepted. And then I can just reuse this moss. Matter of keeping it moist and then planting it back up in a couple of weeks. And this is the third tree. It's now grown substantially since the last time we looked at it. And we have another 3 weeks before the show, if it gets accepted. So I am going to now prune it back all the way to the first 2 leaves in the hope that we get a little bit of nice weather, pushing this to again be nice and green and full by the time of the show. Leaving it now will just lead to too full an image. I have one flower bud here. I might actually leave that in place. I can always cut it off if it doesn't continue flower. But it would be nice if there's a little accent of flower in there, and I might leave 1 or 2 of the branches here and there as well so that it can grow a flower. But let's start with the beginning. I'm going to have a look at the bark. Then I'm going to look at the deadwood and see whether there's old bark that I can still remove. Then I need to decide whether I'm going to add yin liquid to it and prune it today. And then the moss will happen a week before the show. I've had this Potentilla for quite some time and I've been developing this crown ever since I got it. Originally it was just this trunk and this very awkward branch that hang somewhere here in the back, and over time I've just pulled it down, and last year I realized it has rooted here in place. So now the wire that was originally around it is gone. I have some aerial roots here which I'm going to keep. I'm just going to remove the ones that are dead. And now over the years you see that Potentilla bark gets a little bit flaky. But if you remove it, you get a very nice, smooth, shining bark. So I'm removing all this flaky bark to start off with. I do this now, weeks before the show, because that way any more flakes that come off will release before the show. But also if I damage the bark in this process, the damaged areas will brown over before the show. So it doesn't look like a bright green damaged spot. So I've cleaned out the major part, maybe 85–90% of the branches have been cleaned. But what is important to do now is to prune back the whole tree. And I want to prune it all at the same time, so that I get nice compact growth that is all of the same age. I'm just going to go through the whole tree and cut everything back to get very nice tight pads. Also hoping, of course, that now I get a little bit of backpadding on the inside. Yeah, let's see what it looks like at the time of the show. Careful to not prune through leaves and really just prune off branches. And then yeah, these things are always difficult. I like these little hanging branches, but I don't want them to be too heavy or too long. So I also need to prune these a little bit. You know, they are weak. And this is just how I'm going to go through the whole tree, right? Just trim the whole thing back. And then hope that 4 weeks is enough. 3 weeks. To get new growth on there. It is spring after all, it should be possible. And I suppose with that, this is cleaned out sufficiently for now. This is going to be another couple of weeks, so I'm going to just water it. Every once in a while I'll check these branches and see whether I can remove more of these loose fibers of bark. And then in 2 weeks, a week or so before the show, I need to check 2 or 3 weeks. I'm going to replace this moss. Great news! Also, the third tree is in the show, but due to miscommunication, it will already be in the show in 3 days' time. So I now need to very quickly go through. I'm going to have to prune back some of these long stalks. Fortunately, it hasn't exploded with growth, so it is nice and even now. I'll take out a few of these leaves that have turned yellow, take out some of these weeds, replace the moss, but I particularly need to look now at the deadwood, which has in certain spots gone really, really green. So I'm going to clean that up. Maybe I'll have to add a little bit of yin liquid and then ready to go. Up to the show. All cleaned up. I removed most of the algae, some of the weeds, there's a little bit still left here. And then I washed the whole thing down. As you can see, I removed all the moss. And now I have this nice container of moss. I'm going to look for the best pieces and fill this up again. And then it just has to be good enough. I think that now looks pretty good. Give it a gentle wash and then it's ready, I think, for putting it in the show. And there we have it. 3 for 3.